Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Shalom, Nant. Welcome to the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Oh my goodness, guys. Those of you who know and are paying, or rather who follow the show will know that I've been having issues with YouTube, man. Something's going on with their software. I don't know if they're being... I don't know. It's basically repeating the same information of previous shows, and it won't allow you at times, to refresh to a new feed. But I'm hoping I'm live. I just need to double check all of this. You see, now it's making me so self-conscious as to whether everything is legit. But with that being said, let me welcome you guys to the show, the ones who are on and sort of trickling in. I'm going to give it a moment for guys to sort of come in and trickle in. And maybe as I say that, let me just type a quick message in the group just to make sure that everything is pashash. Guys, can you hear the sound? Am I on live? Just give me that feedback in the comments and I will also shout you out. I can see you guys joining the show now. Lazanne Els, welcome na die show. Anti-Marxist ZA, welcome. I'm seeing Drian van Sale, hello. And Gal, or rather Shaul Boerta, guys, welcome. Okay, I think the volume is very loud. Let me turn that down. Okay, I've turned that down quite significantly, so you'll need to let me know, anti-Marxist, if it's sounding better. But it should be much better. With that being said, guys, welcome to the show. It's going to be a jam-packed show. I have very interesting guests. I'm running a little bit behind time. My apologies for that. But I do have two interesting guests who I'm going to bring on to the show. That's, of course, Gideon Joubert, who is the founder of Paratus, or Paratus.info. That's the website where you can go to check out his stuff. It is in the descriptor of this video. At least I hope it is, because... As I said when I started this video, like, YouTube has been acting very funny, guys. So I'm not sure what's going on up in there. But you can check that out. That's Paratus.info. He also goes by @Paratus2014 on Twitter. You can find him there. Who is Paratus, or who is Gideon? I'll let him introduce himself rather when I bring him on. And of course, he will be joined by Jonathan Wright. Jonathan Wright is a law student and a big fundi on all things guns and gun rights. He's the guy who I often look to, to bounce ideas off and strengthen and sharpen my arguments around my advocacy for gun rights. I believe gun rights, and I use that word gun rights on purpose because in South Africa, the ability to own a firearm is seen as a privilege, and the state somehow seems to think it has and should have the right to be the arbiter of who can and can't defend themselves in a society. And I think that has to change, especially given tonight's show, where we'll look at the most recent crime stats that came out a few days ago. I think it's about 4 or 5 days ago now, by Bheki Precious the Fluffy Dog Cele, if I'm to continue my analogy. Doing Buffalo Bill's bidding, as I always say. But he released the latest crime stats, and again, the numbers are absolutely staggering. And I love the spin. So there's two things in terms of my quick analysis on this before I jump to my guests. There's the spin around crime in this country, which the South African Police Service under the ANC has been desperate to make the narrative. And then there's the reality, including the lived reality of people like you and me, who have to navigate a day-to-day in South Africa that is incredibly violent, that is crime-ridden, where your very right to life, liberty, and your property rights are under assault continuously by internal threats in this country, i.e. criminals. And generally speaking, at a broader level, this country, is and I say this with reservation because I have sources, but I don't want to give them up in any way. But, there are credible threats from even outside of South Africa because of our porous borders. But But for the purpose of tonight's conversation, we're going to dwell on the issue of crime and how that daily lived reality of crime that I speak of influences the very psyche of who we are as South Africans. And we're going to make the argument tonight with my guests that there is a serious need for reform in policing in this country, number one. But beyond that, there is a serious need for reform in legislation that governs how and the rights and the liberties we have to defend ourselves. So we're going to look at, what the current law says around self-defense, what the current Firearm Controls Act, its limitations, the pros and the cons, and these two chaps who are doing work in this space, and you'll find out very soon what exactly they're doing, because you know me, I always say it's one thing to be blah, 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 but it's another to actually go out and do something in order to bring the sort of change you want. And these two chaps, Gideon and Jonathan, will speak to that. But in any event, the point I was making is, tonight's conversation will look at the crime stats and really make the argument for why, in our view, we believe that self-defense laws in this country need to be relaxed in order to allow every individual, and again, I talk about individuals, we're a family society, but to allow families to be able to be their own first responders, to empower families with the ability for them to defend themselves. And something like a firearm is such a fantastic tool. I like to call it a force multiplier, because it means that someone who is ordinarily seen as vulnerable or a victim in society can actually have in the moment, the tools to be able to stand their ground and defend themselves. So we're going to make that argument, and we're going to have that conversation tonight on the show, as I now segue to trying to bring my guests on the show. And guys, welcome to it. I am keeping an eye on the comments. This conversation will involve you guys. We will be done by 9 p.m. So let me just quickly say hi to everybody. Henny Boshoff, hi guys. Marika Willemse, hello, hello. Thank you, Anti-Marxist, for your inputs. PEHGT, excuse me, welcome. Marcel, hello. Jason Ratner, hello. Avril, hi Avril. It was good meeting you, by the way. Was it yesterday? Very good meeting you, Avril. Jason Ratner, welcome. Roger Holmes, guys, welcome to it. I'm going to bring on our guests in a moment, but I also just want to quickly say thank you to those of you who have become donators onto the show. Remember, you can support the work that I do, both the show and the actual groundwork that I'm doing of going into, rural communities, informal settlements, townships, suburbia, in order to advocate and inject these liberty ideas into those communities. That's what I've given up my comfy life in order to do. And you can support my work, of course, by donating via either Patreon. Just go to the Patreon website. The link is in the descriptor. And for as little as 17 Rand a month, $1 a month, guys, you can support the work that I do. You also can donate every month via PayPal. I've opened up a PayPal account. And that's quite simple. You use my the email address I have on there in the descriptor, just to donate as much as you can per month. Guys, let me get straight into it and bring on my guests. I will shout out I will, at the end of the show, shout out all the new Patreon subscribers onto the show. I just want to get straight into the meat and potatoes of it all. So after this quick break, I am going to bring on our guest. That's going to be Gideon Joubert, better known as Paratus, onto the show. And of course, Jonathan Wright, who'll be joining us. And we'll be having this conversation of how do we bolster our ability to defend ourselves as citizens, as South Africans. So after the break, guys, I'll see you after this and we'll have that conversation. All right, guys, welcome back to the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Sorry about that little intermission. I had to, as I said, it's YouTube and the software I use has been so glitchy. It's terrible. But with that being said, I have my guests in waiting and in the wings. Of course, as I said before the break, I'm joined by Gideon Joubert at Paratus.info on Twitter, someone who I really, really encourage you guys to follow, especially if you're interested on learning more about self-defense and gun rights and gun usage. And of course, just the everyday issues around that. He does have a website, which I've put the link in the description. That's Paratus.info. You can check that out. Gideon Joubert. And of course, I'm also joined by Jonathan Wright, who is a law student and again, a guru on issues of gun rights, period. And, as I always say to people, when I'm having debates on social media, Jonathan is someone who I often fact check myself before I make a claim. So let me just welcome both of those gentlemen and put them onto the screen. Guys, you are live on the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Welcome to it. And hello.
Evening, Cele and the viewers, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
Excellent. Jonathan, hey man, how you doing?
Is that directed at me or Gideon?
Yeah, Jonathan.
That's at you.
Oh, okay.
Jonathan, welcome to it, man.
Good to hear from you again. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on the show. We're going to have a nice about a 30, 35-minute conversation, because I think there's key issues here that I need us to get into. And guys, as I preface this, I would say this. The National Minister of Police released the crime stats about 4 days ago or so. And in those numbers, we're basically seeing, just as a synopsis, because the show is not about going into the nitty-gritties of it, but really to have the discussion around how does the individual, the South African, our families, how do we respond to this issue going forward, and the debates and the arguments around that. So generally speaking, contact crimes in this country, the sort of crimes that we perceive as being violent, are generally up. Murder is up, and has been for the last 9 years, essentially. Aggravated robbery, all of these serious crimes that invoke and evoke the greatest fear are up. I want to put it to you guys, Gideon. The National Police Minister and the National Police Commissioner, in the press conference, as they were releasing these numbers, were trying their level best to spin a good story. Comments such as, well, they said over the last X amount of years, it's actually been going down. Don't fret as you see this uptick. Don't worry, dear South Africans. We have this under control. In fact, the lockdown has given us a greater impetus, he argued, for just how much control we can have on this issue. Gideon, your comments on this and just your view on the crime situation.
I would put this strongly, but I don't want to swear on your channel. So I'm just going to say it's a fat load of absolute unadulterated nonsense. A year and a half ago, our National Police Commissioner, Bheki Cele, told Parliament in plain language, and these are his words, that the South African Police Service is overstretched and it is impossible, he used the word impossible, for the SAPS to fulfill their constitutional mandate. Now, I would like to know what sort of unicorn pixie dust miracle has occurred between October 2018 and now. Because I believe we've had SAPS budget cuts, the police service has become more dysfunctional, more criminal, more corrupt, more useless than it's ever been in its history, which says a lot. How on earth are they trying to tell us that they've got the situation under control and that it's improving when the figures themselves are telling us we've got an out-of-control crime situation and that violence is increasing year on year? It's nonsense.
Absolutely. Jonathan, I want you to weigh in on this because, there's, again, as I began the show, I made it quite explicit in saying there is the appearance that politicians want to portray, and a hapless police force at the moment, and the reality for the lived reality for the average South African. I know you've been in a few scrap-ups and encounters with the more violent criminal elements in the society. What's your view on some of the comments that were made by not only Bheki Cele, but the spin around it, rather?
Well, the first thing is that, this year, or the most recent crime stats are there's nothing really surprising about them. And I think the one thing I really want to get off my chest is I am both very much not looking forward to and kind of interested in seeing what this time next year's crime stats are going to be, because these crime stats do not include the last 4 months of lockdown and the job losses and the unemployment rates. And I think I can say the same for the unemployment rate, but again, that's something we'll only know in a year or with the quarterly crime stats. So, I mean, these most recent ones, nothing good in them, but I am really, really very worried for what the next ones are going to say.
Absolutely. And maybe before we get into the meat and potatoes of our conversation, let's actually talk about that very briefly, because I've got a feeling, and I want to put it to you guys and get your view on this. I've got a feeling that next year's crime stats that do then factor in the 4 or 5 months of lockdown will be used by politicians as this great boon in the fight against crime, simply because I foresee that there will be likely a drop in certain crime rates, only because we were not on the. For instance, they'll do what they did with the road traffic data. They'll make an argument on, well, look at how these numbers have dropped so significantly. This must be fantastic, they'll say, for fighting in that particular instance road fatalities. And I've got a feeling, as I was making the point, that if there is a sharp drop in any sort of category of crime in next year's crime stats, that the likes of Bheki Cele and this ANC government will be shouting at the hilltops to say, look at how effective our policing is. Gideon?
Yeah, I would not put that past them for a second to try and insult our intelligence by going, oh, you know what? Look how effective we've been at curtailing violent crime, at road, like as you call, traffic deaths, road deaths. It must be because we ban cigarettes and alcohol, because those are the true, that's the root of evil in our society. And they'll completely ignore the fact that on pain of arrest, the entire populace were confined to their homes for a full quarter the entire year. And that they went hard after joggers, surfers, dog walkers, people who were, it's ridiculous. Parents who are trying to chase their kids across the street who are running away, they got arrested and treated as criminals. What I'd like them to say is, okay, let's talk about the criminalization of 300,000 South Africans at the hands of the overzealous SAPs, their crime going outside. And then we can talk about a decline in crime stats, because absolutely, seriously, they will try and spin this to suit them for a fact.
Jonathan, let me bring it to you, because the other area that I looked at, and again, I must stress this, only because very recently I was at the Stop Farm Murders protest outside Parliament, and it's such a, people sort of think that we're doing a Black Lives Matter type-esque focus on this issue, where we're suggesting that only these lives matter, whereas that's not the case. We're basically, at least I am, and the vast majority of people who say stop farm murders, rightly so, are actually suggesting that in addition to SAPs being completely useless, let me walk that back, because that's factually incorrect. But in addition to SAPs being inadequate in dealing and responding to crime in urban areas, it is multiple folds a problem in rural and small holding parts of the country, where invariably you're even farther from a police station, in some cases between 20 and 30 kilometers away from help, a neighbor being, in excess of 5 kilometers away from you. It's even a bigger problem in our rural parts of the country, which necessitates people saying, actually, we need to pay attention to rural safety in this country. We need to pay attention to what's happening to our farmers. Let me just quickly throw a number out, Jonathan, and I'll get your thoughts. Basically in the period under review, firstly, KZN had the most murders, period, followed by Gauteng and then the Western Cape. And I'll get to the Western Cape just now, because I want Gideon to comment on that, especially with the army issue, because in the podcast we did, Gideon, we discussed that, but I'll get to it just now. But Jonathan, in the same period, there were 2 more farm murders that occurred, bringing the number up to 49 murders in 46 incidents. Do you want to maybe quickly talk about this, because it's it's a disaster in my view, at least?
Yeah, well, it's like you said, as far as rural crime goes, farms are so isolated, they're so far away from each other. Of course, it also depends slightly where the farms are. I mean, the farms in the Northern Cape are enormous farms, because the Karoo regions, because the carrying capacity of the land is so much less. But even, I'll make mention of a friend of mine near Malmesbury, even there, the nearest farm isn't exactly like here in the suburbs where you throw a stone and you're there. You have to drive for about 3, 4, 5 minutes before you get to the next building that belongs to somebody else that isn't on your farm. So in all of them, they're soft targets, long response times, and that's just for the neighboring farm. The nearest SAPS, I don't actually know where the nearest SAP station is to. I think it's probably Philadelphia for my friend. But even that's a 15-minute drive when you're going using the N7. So even if you try and hurry it along with sirens going, you're not going to get there until it's too late.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just as a quick note, Jonathan, can you just tilt your camera down? We can't see your lower half of your face, basically.
I haven't moved my camera this whole time. Down, you say?
Or just sit up. But Gideon, let me come to you maybe as Jonathan is doing that. Gideon, dude, the Western Cape basically saw one additional murder compared to the previous financial year of the crime stats. And this is despite, of course, the military deployment, which was, as we were told, will curb gang violence in the province and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of, there's a big dog and pony show when the national government came on this one, and a big scrap fight between the DA and the ANC. Your views on this, because clearly this is clearly not working.
No, and I wrote a whole article on this in July last year already, saying it's not going to work. These deployments, these military, employments, for the correct technical term, because it's inside our national borders, these military employments have never historically had a rate of success that was, successful. It just never did. You cannot fight gang violence by deploying the military. It's just not going to work, and for numerous reasons. So I'm not surprised it hasn't made a dent in it. I'm actually kind of surprised that people thought it would, but unfortunately, here we go. Gang violence is such a prolific and such a difficult thing to address with. You can't send men with assault rifles and uniforms in to patrol streets as if it's a counterinsurgency warfare. That's where anti-gang units and a holistic approach to solving the problem is necessary, and something that the national government has just refused to do. They disbanded the anti-gang units. They disbanded all the specialist units, the crime intelligence that focuses on combating, gangs and gang violence and the criminal enterprises attached to them, stuff that the military wasn't going to do anyway. It just, essentially.
And the funny thing is, because I want to just take a moment on this one, and as I say that, we are at the half-hour mark. Just a reminder to all of you guys who are joining us on the stream, welcome to the Big Daddy Liberty Show. I am your favorite fat boy and street fighter for classically liberal ideas, Big Daddy Liberty. I'm in conversation with Gideon Joubert, better known as Paratus. You'll find him on social media as @Paratus2014, Paratus on Facebook, and of course his website, Paratus.info. Please make sure you subscribe to his work, and I think he does have a YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to that too. I've also joined in conversation by Jonathan Wright, good friend of mine and someone who is very well versed on issues of gun rights and the arguments around them through the lens of liberty. Welcome to it, guys, and welcome to the show. Just as I keep an eye on the comments, guys, some cheeky comments here, which I always enjoy on the show. Paratus, you're being berated here. Where's your cap? Is the question. Why are you not wearing your Paratus cap?
Sorry, guys.
There you go. There you go. Homies repping up in here. And if you go to the Paratus.info website, you can buy a lot of the merch that you see. Excuse me. Oh, yikes. Like kombucha came back. You can see a lot of the merch as he sort of shows the mug off right there on his website. Guys, make sure you support Paratus. Please do that. And a nice little cheeky comment here from Jason Ratner. I don't know if he's being facetious or he actually means this, but he says, banning alcohol and cigarettes solves crime, he says.
He's definitely facetious. I know Jason well.
But again, I like his cheekiness because it does speak to maybe what I've been arguing for a very long time. That if you, and again, this is a very sort of liberty-leaning argument, and I want to get your views on this before we get into other issues. If you have a body politic or a political elite who criminalizes things that the ordinary man does not see as being a criminal activity, of course you'll create a criminal class of good people. Of course you'll create a problem that doesn't exist and, throw, as you mentioned, Gideon, as many as 300,000 people, ordinary salt of the earth South Africans, law-abiding citizens, you'll throw them into prisons because you've created these asinine laws that the average man on the street just says, no, I won't comply. And I often say on social media, and I get your views on this, that good people break bad laws. And that's perhaps what we've seen under this heavy lockdown, especially with the ban on alcohol and the ban on cigarettes. The black market has, and I always call it just the market, to be honest, has exploded under this period. Gideon?
Yeah, it's, again, like if you... Prohibitions don't work.
That's right.
They never worked for hard drugs. They're certainly not going to work for cigarettes, and they never worked for alcohol, and the Yanks tried. And, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but obviously we've got the ANC, who they're no strangers to the underworld. Yeah. And, the Zuma era just exposed that part of them.
That's right.
Of course they're coining. I'm convinced they are merely diverting funds that would have gone to SARS through legal cigarette sales. The only reason these cigarettes are illegal is because there's no tax paid on them. The funding from those are just going straight to Luthuli House. I'm convinced of it. That's the only reason I can imagine, because not even they can be stupid enough to think that the black market won't exist. We've got a black market in this country for hand grenades, for fully automatic assault weapons, all sorts of drugs from soft to hard, prostitution. The sex trade is alive and well, and that's prohibited. What more do we want to, ban? Come on, be serious now, guys.
Absolutely. Jonathan, let me come to you, dude, because again, there is this trail of thought that you'll often hear from, political elites and really people who believe in the state and the supposed miracle nature of the state to be able to control everything. That, it's just a case of clamping down, you'll often hear people say, on these things. And once you have a vice grip on them, then, society becomes this perfect nirvana. We've banned the cigarettes, we've banned the alcohol. Jonathan, do you think the crime rate will be drop because of this? Is this a move that drops crime in this country?
Well, you just said there how some people think that all the state needs to do is just get a grip on things and clamp down. It's like, well, okay, fine, you got to do that, but then you have to stay that way. You'll lose the grip if you let go, at which point, what was the point? And this is the point that a lot of people make that criticize these lockdowns and the bans, is that they're not sustainable. And this goes a little back earlier to discussing good people disobey bad laws. Why do people obey any laws? Generally because they see some form of utility or legitimacy in them. For the seatbelt, for example, the law says wear a seatbelt, and most people will comply with that because they think, yeah, okay, I can see why this is useful, and it's useful to me and maybe someone else, but more importantly, me. But now you ban alcohol and cigarettes, and well, what is this? It doesn't really benefit anyone.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of people that are dependent on these things to help manage their emotions, unfortunately. And yes, the word for it could be addiction. But as long as they're not harming anyone while doing it, cigarettes are an excellent example in this regard. Why would you take away that person's crutch if that's what gets them through the day, if that's what they need? And there's no criticism to anyone that is dependent on such things. But again, this comes back to the legitimacy of it. There is no reason for it. Even people that don't smoke have to really reach to try and find a reason to support the ban. And therefore, people will just go out and, as you say, the black market, which is just the market, it will provide. Because people will search out these things because they don't see a reason.
Absolutely.
Like you can't drink, but you can feed your... You can feed your
back?
gambling addiction.
You can.
Yeah.
You can gamble everything you have away. That's perfectly legal.
I mean, it's absolutely asinine.
It's just
Guys,
incoherent.
as I shape the conversation in the direction I want us to go in, let me just quickly shout out to Marika Willemsov. Thank you so much for the 350 Rand super chat. Oh my goodness, thank you so much for that. Much, much appreciated. And the message is, this is an obligatory super chat for our commie fighting superheroes. I like that. I like that. Remember, guys, you're on the Big Daddy Liberty show. As I always say, never trust a damn commie. So let's get into that and talk about, what I think is the crux of tonight's conversation. Guys, these crime stats paint a picture of a worsening state of affairs for us individuals in this country, for the citizen, the law-abiding individual. It simply is a case that those who are, operating the criminal side of the world, both in government, by the way, and outside of it, are simply looking at ordinary South Africans as easy prey. And that has to, at some point, we have to draw the line and say, no, here and no further on this issue. So let me maybe zoom to the issue of firearms, because in my view, firearms are one of the best ways in which individuals and really families can defend themselves against people who threaten our life, our liberties, and our property rights. Gideon, I'm going to begin with you, because again, you and I have these conversations offline and on the show quite a lot, dude. Your love for firearms, why they're important, and why would you argue that more South Africans need to arm up?
So it's very simple. And this cuts across political spectrum, religious spectrum. Doesn't matter who you are. You can be a complete statist and still understand and believe this. But you are always the first responder to your personal crime scene. No one else is going to get there before you. No one else is going to be able to deal with that situation before you. You need to be prepared in the event of that happening to you, that you have the mindset, the skills, and the equipment in order to triumph over your circumstances and win. That's why we keep coming back to the Paratus mantra: mindset leads, training feeds, equipment follows. And firearms in the 21st century are still the ultimate equalizer. And I also use this example often because it's true. A gun in the hand can allow a small, petite, short, 45-kilogram woman to defend herself from a violent 2-meter tall, 95-kilogram muscular man who seeks to do her harm, or in fact, more than one such a man who seeks to do her harm. It gives her the ability to project equal and greater force in self-defense judiciously. And I'm not aware of any other object in the modern world that provides that kind of power, or empowerment, rather, to somebody.
Absolutely. Jonathan, I must segue to you, dude, because again, we have this conversation quite a lot. The idea that it would stand to reason, and I want to throw to you the tropes that are often thrown at us in response to an argument that Gideon, for example, has just made. So, an individual who's anti-gun, maybe from Gun Free South Africa, that organization, might be listening to this and says, but you see, here are these right-wing gun nuts again, with their gunslinging, wild, wild west antics. These guys basically want us to shoot each other and kill each other, because if there's more guns in people's hands, the gun-free SA lobbyist and lefty would argue, if there's more guns in people's hands, then we'll just be shooting each other to settle our disputes. How wrong or right is this, Jonathan?
Well, I think it's very easy to say that is very categorically wrong. And the United States is a very good example in this regard, where, as Gideon said the other day, there are more firearms in that country than there are people, yet their homicide rate is about 5 per 100,000. That was the last one I checked. But even then, even if it was 20 per 100,000, that would still be a lot lower than here, where there are, I can't think of the ratio off the top of my head, but there are less firearms in this country than there are people, that's for sure. And the same goes for a lot of other very violent countries. But the US is right there. Another stat last I saw was about 50%, approximately 50% of the population owns firearms. Yet again, homicide rate is only 5 per 100,000. It varies state to state, yes. But again, there is no consistency between states that have high rates and low rates, except to say that there is no pattern to say where there are more firearms, there are more homicides in general.
Gideon, I'm going to bring it back to you because the pro-gun restriction dolt will then listen to Jonathan say, "Aha! Of course you'd bring up America, but look at the number of mass shootings in America. You basically hate South Africans. You want to bring mass shootings over here. You basically want a situation where." We're just killing each other en masse. I look at the EFF. Don't you think they'll go out and start shooting all of us because they hate us, or the ANC or the DA, in fact, would go around shooting because the DA hates blacks, right? So it'll go around shooting black people. And by the way, these are arguments people actually make on my social media feed. So please, guys, don't think I'm being hyperbolic.
So it's difficult to address this in a single sentence. All I can say is, mass shootings in America are statistically insignificant. They just aren't. They are blown way out of proportion by the media. But let's zoom away from the US. Let's go to other examples. There are mass killings. There have been numerous mass killings in Australia after Port Arthur that have been more deadly in the death ratio. There have been several mass shootings, but most of them have been arson and vehicular attacks. The UK is rife with mass stabbings, as are many other countries in Europe. Mass killings and massacres are not a function of equipment. You cannot stop them through regulation. I mean, how many mass killings have there been in France with full auto assault weapons that were smuggled in by terrorists? The French gun laws made zero difference there, not at all. And if you look at the top 10 most murderous countries in the world, El Salvador, Jamaica, Honduras, South Africa was number 7 at one stage. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. The one thing they all have in common, apart from being economic shitholes of the worst kind, is also the fact that they have highly prohibitive firearm laws, which are pretty much either supremely restrictive or an outright ban on civilian firearm ownership. Now, correlation does not equate causation. But gosh darn it, there's not one pro-gun country in the top 10 most murderous nations on earth.
That's right.
Come on, guys. Pull the other one.
And, seriously. I must bring up this point in the last sort of 15 minutes we have, guys. I'm sorry, we're running out of time. But I must bring up this issue because, it's critically important around the need, therefore, for not only guys like you to debunk these arguments continuously with great patience and careful instruction, but also for you guys to be, and I'm segueing here, and I think you guys will know where I'm going, for you guys to do the groundwork required to win the argument in communities that actually gun ownership is not a big, scary boogeyman thing. It's a normal, everyday thing, especially once a culture develops around that. And I want you guys to speak to this, Gideon, because we were having this discussion on Sunday to say, there's often a trope, another trope thrown by often the leftist individual in particular, the one who trades on race, that, no, this thing of guns, it's a white thing, they'll say. It's just these white right-wingers, man, who are holding on to this gun thing. We in the black communities, we don't like guns, we don't believe in guns. Ooh, I'm getting angry even as I say this because I know how... Oh, I nearly swore. I know how much of nonsense that is. I mean, I come from a family, for instance, my grandfather, a commercial black successful farmer in KZN. We have a gun culture in our family that spans back that as far back. But I wanted to chime in on this one, Gideon. Are we blacks just unable to handle guns and it's a white thing?
Well, no. Two things on that. First one, lawful licensed firearm owners. Black people outnumber white people and have for almost a decade by now. Absolutely. I don't know the exact stats, but that's where we are. And secondly, the heritage in this country. Black South Africans have fought actual wars, 2 of which major blood was spilled. The one was the Amashlubi under Chief Langalibashlele in, I think, 1873, where the Natal colonial government wanted to confiscate their rifles, and he said, get wrecked, no. And it led to open conflict. And the other one was the Basotho War of the Gun, 1880-1881, between the Basotho and the Cape Colony, where the colonials used the Peace Preservation Act of 1878, which basically was racist gun control. It's like common sense gun law. We can't trust the natives with guns. They make us nervous. Let's confiscate their guns. And the Basotho was just like, ain't happening. They completely wrecked the force that was sent against them in several running battles. And the war itself nearly bankrupted the Cape Colony, and they had to sue for peace. Like, okay, sorry, we got our asses kicked. We're not going to try to take your guns. Like, the right to keep and bear arms in this country, black people have spilled actual blood.
Absolutely.
It's part of your heritage.
Absolutely.
It's something you need to be proud of. It's something you need to understand and cherish and welcome as a part of your cultural identity.
You know, Jonathan, I want to throw it to you because we had this conversation on Sunday, and I said, actually, we Zulus in particular have been very vociferous also in our defense of guns. In fact, one of the first clans that adopted and used guns, and it spread, of course, amongst other confederacies in the part, sort of late 18th century, into the 19th century, was the Mthethwa clan, the Mthethwa Confederacy, one of the first to use guns. And, ever since then, they've formed part of the Zulu nation, if you will. But let me segue into why I'm saying this is important and why we have a long tradition, and I want you to speak on it. There are families much like mine across this country, for whatever reasons, whether we are in the farming areas where there's a keen appreciation for gun rights, because, being on our farms in this country, whether you're black or you're white, is a very dangerous profession. And that's why I frown on people who try and make farm murders a race issue, because we face that fire together as a nation. Anyway, let me pass from there. Or whether you're in another industry, which I have family in, which is the taxi industry, which can be prone to conflict and criminal elements, I must say. The ability to defend oneself is critically important. Jonathan, talk to me about the Firearms Control Act. Is this piece of legislation making it easy for ordinary law-abiding people to be able to acquire a gun, get the training, and defend themselves?
I think the short and sweet answer is no. And I'd repeat no several more times if it helped drive it home. But it really is that simple. And I'd go so far as to say that I have a hypothesis that the Firearms Control Act is actually undermining itself. It's supposed to reduce illegal firearm or unlicensed, unregistered firearm proliferation, but I think that it probably actually encourages it because of the steep barriers to entry. Because, we're talking about alcohol and cigarettes. If people want something, they're going to go and get it if they do not see legitimacy in that rule. And we can take a very poor family, or even a person for that matter, in a shack in Nyanga or wherever it is, who really is terrified for their life against crime, and they believe that the best way to deal with that and to protect themselves is with a firearm. But they can't afford whatever 1,500 Rand, last I checked, just for a handgun and legal test proficiency, and the 4-month wait for that to convert to competency, and however many thousands for the gun, and the 3-month wait for that to get licensed, and the money for the safe, and putting it in the shack. Of course, there are people that are in these conditions that go through the effort to jump through these hoops. They dig a hole, they fill it with concrete, they bolt a safe to it, and my hat goes off to those people. But not everyone is in that position. Not everybody has the luxury of time to wait that long. Especially, I think KwaZulu-Natal is a very good example with politically motivated killings. There, if you are a target, you don't have 7-8 months to wait for the police to sit there and think, no, we're not sure, maybe, because you don't even know if you're going to get it. It's completely discretionary. You have to write a motivation, and that's not a guarantee because they can deny it, and then you can appeal it, but that's another month, 2 months,
2 months, yeah.
And if that fails, then you can still reapply and start the whole process again, or go on judicial review, which is however long it takes to get a court date. It's a very anti-poor piece of legislation.
Gideon, again, Jonathan says it's incredibly anti-poor. And for those of us, I told you, of course, that I'm in the process of trying to get my gun license. I'm busy doing the booklet and all that shebang. But for someone like me who is, out in communities and I'm already doing the ground war, you at times don't even have those 3 months to wait necessarily, given that your need might be quite imminent. Talk to me about what you consider to be the barriers for entry and the cons of the FCA, and we'll move on to what we can do to address that.
Well, Jonathan actually did a really good job in rewriting most of the legislation. But as he said, the costs are prohibitive. The waiting times are prohibitive. In my ideal world, I would not have a registry at all because they don't work, but that might not be sellable. So I would say we need to replace the entire system very simply. License the person, register the firearm. You are the license holder like you are a driver's license holder. If you are competent, law-abiding, and comply with the provisions of the Act for what those are defined as, you are the license holder. Whatever you then own goes on a registry. And to be honest, we've realized that numerical limits are useless because ultimately finances are a far, far bigger restriction on what people choose to own and how much than what the law says anyway. So we need to make this law simple. We need to make it understandable. We need to make it workable, transparent. It's an opaque, onerous mess at the moment. And especially if like the vast majority of people in this country have been denied quality education. You might be illiterate or numerate to certain degrees. To put you through this process, you are denied the most effective tool to protect your constitutional right to life, right to bodily integrity, right to dignity, right to freedom and security of person, which is a firearm. And all firearm rights are based on that right to self-defense. You are denied this right because the government failed you, and you are poor and you can't read or write. And now you're just getting, oh, by the way, because of this, you're just going to have to be a walking victim for violent criminals. How is that just? How is that fair?
Guys, as we run out of time, my goodness. Yes, I've always said this, guys, that there is a critical need for voices like yours to be in communities, to prosecute these ideas, and to literally win people on these ideas. Because I can assure you now, I can take both of you into Nyanga, where I've been doing work on the groundwork that I've been on, and we can sit with community leaders there, we can sit with the community members themselves, and we can have this conversation, and I can tell you now, it will resonate with them. Because their lived reality, when my big black bakkie drives out, and when we're done with a nice little meeting again, they live in that reality of roving criminals who are armed to the teeth. But guys, let me keep an eye on the comments too. Sorry about that, guys. Let me bring in some comments before I ask you, what sort of amendments you think, or rather, what sort of gun legislation we should have, and I'll put something to you guys, and I hope you will say yes. But let me go to some questions. Rosalind was basically saying, will a paintball gun defend me if I can't wait for a gun license? So just hold on to that question, guys. And let me just quickly shout out to Tough Gemini for the 85 Rand super chat. Keep up the good work, guys, he says. How do we circumvent this imminent economic disaster? That's obviously from our earlier chat around the cluster mess that is the state and its legislation. Monet Dupria says 99% of the murders my colleagues and I investigate are committed with knives and broken beer bottles. Well, there you go. Again, I'm assuming Monet, being a police officer, is saying, look, this is what we kind of face, in law enforcement. And Monet, I hope you didn't take offense to me paintbrushing the entire SAPS there. But anyway, I'll move on. Lynette Smith, there was 70 handguns stolen from a security company armory today in Johannesburg. That's also a big issue. Whoa, guys, let me just quickly shout out to Nick. Nick, thank you so much. Dude, 1,400 Rand super chat. Guy, that is incredible. Thank you so much. He then says, why don't you speak...
I'm chilling here. I lift my glass to Nick.
Seriously, man. I'm kudos to you, homie. Thank you so much. Nick's comment, though, is, why don't you speak to the average Joe citizen? ZACP... are an anti-religious and open border party. Joe Citizen doesn't, I'm assuming he says Joe Citizen doesn't identify with the ZACP and the DA. That's a good comment. But guys, let me maybe sort of condense these questions here, because I think you'll answer them in the following question. Guys, what do we do to make it easier for the South African citizen, the individual, and really families to defend themselves? How do we amend something like the Firearms Control Act? What are the top three interventions that you can think of? Jonathan, I'm going straight to you on this one, that we can put in place to make it easier for the citizen to defend themselves.
I think the easiest way to fix everything, short of because the long-term goal would be repeal the entire Firearms Control Act, rewrite it, new law.
Absolutely.
But until then, what is a today solution? One would be, as Gideon says, license the user, register the firearm, get rid of the discretionary checks. So instead of the SAPS may grant a license, it says that they will, if you tick the right boxes. That'll make the process so much quicker because there's no need to read anything. Get rid of motivations and anything that requires reading. Get rid of all of that. That'll be a huge step in the right direction. But unfortunately, it won't be the magic bullet, pun perfectly intended, for all of that because the FCA is just that bad. We can fix what we identify as the core problems, but it won't make it a generally workable piece of legislation. It'll make it more workable, but it won't fix the problem.
Absolutely. Gideon, I'm just going to go to you, just a quick thought on how you think we can bolster the individual, really families' ability to defend themselves in this country and really begin that conversation around demystifying guns, period.
So the first thing I'd recommend people do is if mindset is more important than the training and the equipment.
Absolutely.
You need the other two. Okay. And mindset can be developed with training. So you need to realize that you have the right to life and your life is worth defending, and the life of your family members and your children. Those lives are worth defending. Now you need to figure out how the heck are you going to defend these lives? And there are so many high-quality self-defense and combatives trainers. Most of them incorporate firearms into the regimes. The vast majority of them have other methods that you can use in the meantime until you go through that process. And at the same time, it will also bolster your mindset. So speak to me, go read my articles, get training people. It's that important.
Absolutely. Guys, as we reach the tail end of this conversation, there's something I've spoken to you guys about on Sunday. And maybe I didn't give enough details, but I want to do it live on the show. Because you know me, guys, I'm a firm believer that it's not enough for those of us who are on the liberty side of the spectrum to sort of have a chat on these shows and, almost have a colleague of mine called it a jerk circle. Wow. But, it's not enough for us to be just here. The whole point of the Big Daddy Liberty brand is we take these ideas and we put them into the communities that absolutely need them. And if they stood behind them, would help us push back against the bad ideas, push back against the overreach by a political elite in this country. So here's my challenge to both of you gentlemen, live here on the Big Daddy Liberty show. If I call on you two and I say, guys, let's move into the communities, host little groups, little seminars, we can do door-to-doors in some cases, just to push these ideas into the communities, have them engage us and share and build, if you will, a ground-led swell of South Africans who demand their rights to be able to defend their life, their liberties, and their property rights, whether they're the poorest individual living in a sand dune in a shack somewhere here in Cape Town, or the most richest and leafiest guy in Constantia who believes that, I don't need to have my own guns, private security will look after me. Can I count on you guys to join me on the ground war? And when we talk about issues of self-defense, gun rights, to have you guys as part of the mission?
Absolutely.
Hell yes. You would never ask.
You mentioned Nyanga, and I wanted to chime in. I've been to Nyanga. I've worked there for 3 days, and it pains me to feel that there are people that do not have the opportunities that more able people have in terms of money or opportunity to get a firearm and do these things.
Absolutely. No, guys, I'm very happy to hear this, and I'm hoping that those who are watching the show, guys, if you are on the show, sorry if you just joined us, we're about to end, but at least I know these are two gentlemen who will be in communities with me, and we fight this battle of ideas in the communities where they matter, as we build that society that I argued is prosperous, property-owning, non-racial, and of course, freedom-loving. And you can only defend those things if you have ordinary people who are able to defend themselves against not only criminals, but also the criminals in government. Guys, thank you so much. Let me say thanks to both of you.
Thank you, Sicily.
Before I let you go, let me see if there's any questions I must... there's a big fight here on my... Yo, guys, what's going on in the comment section? Big fight here. Ding, ding, ding. It's Monday Night Raw between Nick and Marika Willemse. Guys, what is going on? But in any event, the fight is seemingly a ZACP one. But just to maybe tie off the point, guys, and to thank every single one who is watching also, how do the guys reach you? I'll begin with you, Jonathan. What are your social media? I know they're in the description of the video, but how do the guys reach you, especially as they maybe want to support your efforts to rewrite the Firearms Control Act, or maybe even give inputs in that regard? How can guys reach you if you're keen, of course, on people reaching you?
Yeah. The best way to contact me would be through Twitter. And I'm not going to, like on Sunday night where I messed up my Twitter handle at JonathanHFW, as you said, it'll be in the description below, but that's the best way to engage me.
Perfect. G, homie, I'm going to let you get the last word. How do the folks reach you, and how do we get some of that cool merch, man? Come on now, don't be stingy, let us know.
Okay. So it's my website, Paratus.info. There is a store where you can buy the cap. The hoodies will hopefully be on sale from next week onwards. They're pretty cool. And we'll, roll out some other merch. And from the website, you link to my Facebook, to my YouTube, to my Twitter account. So you can track everything down of me that you need to know. It's www.paratus.info or just paratus.info in your search bar, and you'll be there. So that's me.
Absolutely. Thank you, my brother. And again, thank you to every single one of you who watched the show. And, as I said, these two chaps will be a part of, the ground war as we bring these ideas into ordinary communities. Guys, thank you for joining me. And I'll see you on the next show, hopefully, when we have a chat about this issue.
Thank you, Sichley.
Thank you, Sichley, for having us.
Alrighty. So those were the lads from the, that was Gideon Joubert from the Paratus group. He's the founder of that, and it's a fantastic website. I really encourage you guys to go onto that. It's Paratus.info. Just check it out. The link is in the descriptor here in the video. As you said, lots of merch, cool stuff. Hope you guys will pick some of that up and support the homie, because he's doing some really good work in that regard. And I really do look forward to having him and Jonathan, by the way, on the ground war as we push these ideas into communities. Trust you me, guys, there is a big conversation to be had around some of even the most poorest communities, poorest segments of our communities, to give them the power to be able to say, hey, I can defend myself. I can stand my ground against those who try and infringe on my life, my liberty, and my property rights. Absolutely. That is the sort of society I want to see us build. Remember, you can support the Big Daddy Liberty Show by becoming a donator on the show, as little as $1 a month, guys, on Patreon, or do it. Just search the links in the descriptor. And of course, I've opened up PayPal, and you can also donate on there too. Guys, I'm on the ground, I'm doing the work, and I'll start bringing you that on the show. Ooh, you guys, if you only knew the exciting stuff that's coming your way. There's a little collaboration I've cooked up, which I think you'll enjoy. A lot of you always ask me, Big Daddy, why don't you partner with this guy? Why don't you talk to this guy or that guy? And I'm like, guys, no. If people already hold my views, there's no need for me to literally, almost distract, if I will, have these multiple meetings. Instead, what I'll do is encourage them to take their ideas and their work into the communities that I'm essentially working in. So there's a lot of collaborations coming in that regard with some of your faves. So with that being said, let me thank you once again for joining me on the show, and a nice reminder, as I always do at the end of every show, for you to never trust a commie.